Ghost City Protocol. Why build billion-dollar cities no one lives in? The silent castles and the architecture of speculation. Imagine walking through a valley in the Bolu district of Turkey. The mist clings to the rolling green hills, and as it clears, you see a sight that feels like a glitch in the simulation. Hundreds of identical blue-roofed Disney-style castles rise from the earth, arranged in perfect, symmetrical rows. It looks like a fairy tale kingdom, or perhaps a surreal art installation. But there is no laughter here, no music, no people. There is only the sound of the wind whistling through empty window frames and the crunch of gravel under your boots. This is Burj Al Babas. It was supposed to be a massive luxury oasis for the world's elite, featuring over 700 villas, shopping centers, and Turkish baths. But today, it is a graveyard of architectural ambition. The project was discontinued in 2017 following the bankruptcy of its sponsor, leaving behind a forest of concrete ghosts that the Turkish economy simply cannot digest. It has since become the subject of a major fraud trial involving a $67 million scam. At first glance, Burj Al Babas looks like a tragic mistake, a bad business decision made by a dreamer who flew too close to the sun. But when you zoom out, you realize that these empty castles are just one small symptom of a much larger global phenomenon. From the high-rise forests of China to the stalled developments in Spain, we are building massive cities for millions of people who will never arrive. Welcome to the Ghost City Protocol. To understand this mystery, we have to look at the numbers, and the numbers are staggering. Real estate and construction currently account for roughly 15% of China's entire gross domestic product, GDP. In the last 20 years, the establishment of new cities has become a primary engine of national growth, but this engine is running on a dangerous fuel that researchers call the pathology of ghost cities. Meet Kangbashi. 20 years ago, this area in Inner Mongolia was a desolate stretch of the Gobi Desert, home to just a few villages and 1,400 people. Yes. Then massive coal and natural gas reserves were discovered. Ordos became one of the wealthiest cities in China virtually overnight, its per capita GDP even surpassing Beijing and Shanghai. The local government faced a unique problem. They had an enormous influx of capital and needed a way to invest it. Their solution was to build a new administrative capital from scratch. Kangbashi was called into being through rampant speculation, designed to be a modern city that would serve as an iconic symbol of political achievement. However, for years after its completion, it remained largely empty. In 2011, occupancy rates were reported at less than 30%. It became the international poster child for the ghost city, a place where the infrastructure of a metropolis exists without the pulse of a society. Why would a government spend billions to build a city that sits empty? The traditional explanation is miscalculation. We are told that urban planners simply got the projections wrong, but if you look at the protocol, you see a much more calculated reality. In China, the reallocation of resources to private firms and the construction of new urban centers has been a key source of productivity growth. Construction creates jobs and fuels the demand for steel and cement. For local governments, building a city is a form of capitalization on urban land, a way to generate public finance and meet GDP targets regardless of whether anyone actually lives there. For the average citizen, these ghost cities have become a form of concrete gold. In Ordos, newly rich residents began buying houses as if they were buying a cabbage. By 2011, the average local investor owned 3 to 4 homes, treating excess real estate as an instrument of financial speculation rather than a place to live. In a world of volatile markets, an empty apartment in a ghost city is seen as a stable asset. But this system has a dark side. We are witnessing the birth of wasted cities, developments that consume massive amounts of steel, cement, and energy, but provide zero social utility. The environmental cost is immense, with some estimates suggesting these empty buildings account for over 760 square kilometers of vacant floor area, representing a staggering waste of resources. We are building a civilization where the image of a city is more important than the reality of one. Burj Al Babas and Kangbashi are monuments to an economy addicted to construction as a form of survival. What happens to a society when its wealth is locked inside buildings that no one uses? And what is the secret exit strategy used when the bubble finally bursts? Das Aufrüst To find the answer, we have to look deeper into the macroeconomics of the housing boom and uncover the hidden protocol that turns a vibrant dream into a concrete nightmare. The $67 million mirage and the forced utopia. To the outside observer, the blue-roofed castles of Burj Al Babas look like a Disney dream turned into a nightmare. But to the Turkish prosecutors in the Bolu district, they look like a crime scene. As the investigation unfolded, it became clear that this wasn't just a project that failed due to a bad economy. It was a systematic operation that collected over $67 million from 1,041 financial transactions between 2014 and 2018. The developers, the Sarat Group, targeted wealthy investors from Gulf countries, selling them a fairy tale lifestyle that was never intended to exist. Even after filing for bankruptcy protection in 2018, they continued to make sales, spinning a web of missing or unreliable records that makes it nearly impossible today to know who actually owns which concrete shell. Prosecutors are now seeking prison sentences of up to 885 years for each of the 13 defendants, alleging that the entire luxury oasis was merely a facade for aggravated fraud. But while the Burj Al Babas trial exposes the dark underbelly of private greed, the situation in China reveals a much more chilling version of the Ghost City Protocol, the state-led phantom urbanization. To understand the human cost, we have to look at New Beichuan. In May 2008, a catastrophic earthquake leveled the original town of Beichuan, killing over 15,000 people. In a display of royal road modernization, the Chinese government decided to relocate the entire town to a new site, finishing construction in just 1 year. On the surface, it was a miracle of speed. But underneath, it was a tragedy of design. The government built a city that its rural inhabitants could neither appreciate nor afford. It was a city built on what researchers call a blood transfusion, massive capital injections from other provinces, but it lacked the blood generation of local industry. Today, New Beichuan stands as a double empty shell. Its residents, former peasants turned urban consumers by fiat, sit on the streets playing mahjong, staring at luxury apartments they cannot afford, while the factories built for appearance's sake close down within months of being inspected by high-level officials. This is the pathology of ghost cities, a system where the aesthetic form of the urban is more important than the social reality. In China, housing prices have been growing nearly twice as fast as national income for a decade, fueled by a speculative fever that treats real estate as concrete gold. In Ordos, the average investor owns 3 to 4 homes, buying houses as if they were buying a cabbage, even as occupancy rates in cities like Kangbashi struggle to break 30%. The environmental price of this protocol is staggering. We are not just wasting money, we are burying the planet's resources alive. Estimates suggest that China's wasted cities account for over 765 square kilometers of vacant floor area. This represents a colossal expenditure of steel, cement, and energy used to build monuments to vacancy. We are literally truckloading the foundations of the future into buildings that will slowly decay under government control, providing zero social utility while leaving an indelible ecological scar. We have built a civilization addicted to the image of growth, a world where the pulse of the market is more valuable than the pulse of society. But what happens when the concrete gold starts to melt? And what is the final strategy for a world that has run out of space to build its empty dreams? To find the answer, we must look at the chemistry of collapse and the movement toward architectural subtraction in a time of global crisis, the ruin porn economy, and the architecture of the void. We have seen the Disney-style shells in Turkey and the high-rise forests in China, but there is a final invisible layer to the Ghost City Protocol. It is a layer that exists not in concrete, but in the glowing screens of our smartphones. In the year 2026, these wasted cities have found a strange second life as a digital commodity. This is the era of #ruinporn. On platforms like Instagram and Pinterest, millions of users are captivated by images of modern ruins. We see our stickman explorer walking through the silent streets of Tianducheng, the fake Paris of China, capturing the perfect shot of a decaying Eiffel Tower replica. The porn suffix isn't accidental. Like pornography, these images offer a sanitized, visual sublimation of reality, stripping away the actual human suffering of bankruptcy and displacement and replacing it with a safe aesthetic thrill. AI algorithms now actively monetize this fascination with decay. The more we scroll through empty malls and abandoned castles, the more the system rewards the spectacle of failure. We are witnessing a recursive loop of speculation. First, we build empty cities for financial gain, and when they fail, we sell the image of their failure for digital engagement. But for the millions of people who invested their life savings into concrete gold, the reality is far from aesthetic. In Ordos, when the real estate bubble finally showed signs of collapse in 2011, prices tumbled more than sevenfold, evaporating the wealth of entire families. These investors are now trapped in a tethered economy of debt. They own assets they cannot use in cities that don't function, but they are still legally tied to the financial obligations of their empty dreams. The protocol has effectively turned the concept of home into a permanent subscription to negative equity. So what is the strategy for the future? How do we heal a planet that is scarred by billionaire dollar cemeteries of concrete? The answer lies in a radical movement called architectural subtraction. For centuries, architecture has been understood as an exclusively additive act, the process of putting more and more material onto the land. Но в мире, где заброшенные каркасы зданий, известные в Италии как икомостро, уродуют ландшафт, архитекторы начинают практиковать ordering act. Вместо того, чтобы строить новое, они предлагают Let's Shrink, протокол планового демонтажа и деконструкции. We are seeing the rise of the Void Project. In cities like Berlin and Paris, visionary planners are no longer looking for fillers for empty lots. Instead, they are learning to plan for emptiness. They realize that in a world of information overload and digital slop, nothingness may be the last subject of plausible certainty. The movement for active construction in 2026 demands that we stop treating the Earth as a dumping ground for speculative assets. It starts with the understanding that every building carries a death drive, an innate tendency toward its own future ruin. If we acknowledge the fragility of our structures from the design phase, we can move away from the linear economy of take, make, dispose and toward a state of ecological sovereignty. The Burj Al Baba's castles and the empty towers of Kangbashi are not just monuments to greed, they are mirrors of our own collective desires. They show us a world where the image of growth has become more valuable than growth itself. Your heart has a budget of 3 billion beats. The planet has a finite budget of steel and sand. Don't let your wealth be erased inside an empty shell. In an era of ghost cities and synthetic reality, the most revolutionary act you can perform is to value the space between the walls. Because a city is not built of concrete, it is built of the people who belong there. The repair starts when we stop building the void and start living in the truth.